going to start building up the shank now. So this is going to be an upswept shank. It's going to be wedfit friendly as well. So I want to have a look to see where my two under bezels are, because the tip of the shank is going to sort of nestle in between these two here. I'm going to draw a guideline kind of about here. Just hold down Shift to bring that straight up. I'm going to do a blend curve from the end of this point to somewhere on our shank. Blend curve from this point here to our outer shank. Now point number 2 is actually pointing off in the wrong direction, so I'm going to flip that. And I also am going to change the continuity so it's tangency rather than curvature. And I'll press OK. I'm going to delete our guide curve there and mirror this across the y-axis. Now I'm selecting our outer ring rail. I'm going to trim and then join. So we've now got one open curve. Now I can offset this. I'm going to offset this the same distance as what we originally had, but now on the inside. That was 1.95 millimeters. So you can see our offset curve here is syncing up nicely with our finger size. Now let me rebuild this curve here. If I turn on my control points, you can see we've got a lot of high density control points at the top here, and then some control points here which are going to be creased or kinked. So I'm going to rebuild this inside curve here. And I'm going to rebuild this with 31 control points and a 3-degree curvature. I'm going to do the same with the outside. So right click to rerun that command and press OK. Now if I turn my control points on, you'll see we've got a nice even distribution of those control points. So I'm going to select a little bit hard to see here. I'm going to select the second and fourth control points of the inside curve. I can select the top control points and just scale those out. So this is the shape of my curve now. So just putting a nice shape to that. So we've got something like that. Again, I'm going to delete the second and fourth control points. And then I can just refine the outside shape as well until I've got something like that. That's looking quite nice. The next thing I'm going to do is put a curve, or start building up my shank by defining the outside shape of it. I'm going to come to my top viewport. I'm going to do an arc. I'm going to use my flyout menu, and I want this third one along, which is arc, start, and then the end, and then the direction. So clicking anywhere around here, I'm going to hold down Shift, and I want to bring this out to about 2.4. Then I can just sort of create the outside shape there. So the finished width of this is going to be 2.2 millimeters finished. So I've made this a little bit wider than what we need because we're going to trim this back. Now I'm going to move this into position. So snap to the center of that arc and just sort of anywhere around there, because I can bring this up. I'm actually going to isolate these 3 curves. So now I've got our outside curve shape. I'm going to again move this, snapping from that point there up to there, and then mirroring that across the y-axis. So now we've got our curve here, we've got our 2 shapes, and they are touching. Everything's nice and aligned, so I am going to do a sweep 1. Selecting our 2 profile curves. Everything can stay the same. I'm going to press OK to accept that. So let's carry on with the shank. Now all of my curves here, if I select my top control points and profiles, these are all on the same plane. You can see there's no option for me to scale these up and down. I can scale those left and right, but the gumball has no up-down scaling option. So all of these are on the same plane. I can see that quite easily. And that makes it quite easy for me to complete the shank. I'm going to extrude the curve, this inside curve here, and I want both sides to equal yes. And I'm just going to snap this to the same width as our outside shape. I'm going to take both of those and I'm going to change the object layer so we can see that a little bit easier. And now I'm going to loft. I'm going to loft the, not the curve, but the surface edge here, and then the inner surface edge. Right click again, and then do the same on the other side. Then I can join the outside shape, the lofted surface, the inside shape, and the other lofted surface. And then if we've done everything correctly, we can cap this. And we've now created a nice closed solid poly surface. So let's show everything. The next thing I want to do is start building up the bridge here. I've got this shape here. This is offset 1.8 millimeters. I'm going to draw another arc. And it's just going to be the second option here, which is start end and then a point on the arc. I'm going to snap to a inside finger rail, hold down Shift and snap to the other side. And then I'm going to snap somewhere up here to create an arc, which is one segment of our finger size. This can then be offset. And we want this 1.8 millimeters. I'm going to select both of these and isolate. And then just draw some lines to close this up. Select all of those and join. You can see we've joined into one closed curve. Let's show everything. And then this bridge here, I'm going to extrude to the finished width that we want. So we want it to finish at 2.2 millimeters wide. So I want to add 0.15 millimeters to that in order to give us some space for casting and cleanup. So let's start by extrude curve. So 2.2 plus 0.15 is 2.35. But because we're coming up both sides, I want to divide that by 2. And if I select that bridge there, come to my box edit, you can see that I've got a y-axis measurement of 2.35. And that's the measurement that we want. Coming back to my layers, I'm going to change the object layer. And now I'm going to draw some curves here, which are going to taper in our shank. So let me make this full screen. I'm going to select a line. I want a line on both sides. Coming down here, I'm going to snap to our center curve here. And as I hold down Shift, I want to put in our values of 2.35 divided by 2. Hold down Shift to confirm that line. Again, going to box edit, we can see that we have a y-axis dimension of 2.35. Now I'm just going to draw up a line somewhere around here. I want this to be quite a bit higher than where our bridge sort of starts down the bottom here. So this is kind of a little bit higher up. Now let's draw a curve. I'm going to snap to the point of that line there. Hold down Shift to constrain this in an up-down orientation. And I'm just going to snap it to at the center of our gem, somewhere around here. Now I'm selecting both of those curves, our first line which went straight up, and then our curve which bent in. I'm going to join those. Now I'm going to mirror this across the y-axis, select that, and again join those together. You can see we've got those joined into one open curve. What I'm looking at here is what size our tip is going to be, because I don't want this to be like a super razor sharp tip. I want to have a little bit of a blunt end on there, which is going to help with casting and cleanup as well. So let's select our main shank there. I'm going to use the wire cut command. Using our curve that we've just created. And right click again. and then I can delete away those two excess pieces. So this is our shank here. It's got a nice shape to it. Now I'm not too worried about our bridge here poking through, but what I'm looking at is this step here. So whenever you've got a bridge which is parallel and a shank which tapers in, you will find that you have a small step where the shank tapers away from that bridge. In this case, it's fairly minor and we can hide that a little bit without too much trouble. I can now refine this shank a little bit. I'm going to fillet the edges on the inside just to soften those off. So fillet edge is the command. We've also put that in our toolbar here. I want a radius of 0.6 is sort of my go-to radius. I'm going to select the two inside edges of our bridge. Right click and right click again. We can see that we've got that nice filleted edge there. It's going to be a lot more comfortable on the finger, and the jeweler that's cleaning this up doesn't have to manually do that. I'm going to right click to rerun that command and select the edges of our outside shank. Now a 0.6 fillet is going to be too much for the tip here, so I will need to add some control handles. So if you have a look at the top here, we can see that we can add a handle. I'm going to add one right about where this bridge starts. Do that on both sides. Right click once I've done that. Then I'm going to make the top radius much smaller. I'm going to make that 0.1. Again, I'll do that on both sides just by clicking the handle here. So you can see we've got a radius which runs from 0.6 to 0.1 millimeter. And again, that is looking quite nice. I'm also going to do a smaller radius of maybe 0.3. I'm going to select the two outside edges of our bridge. Right click and right click again. And you can see that our step that we had is kind of blended in quite a lot there. Now, if you have a look, our bridge is still poking up above our rounded shank. If you've got a flat shank or a square shank, this won't be an issue. But because our shank rounds off, it is exposing the edges here. So I'm going to come to my front viewport. And basically all I'm going to do is just draw a line. I'm going to mirror this across the other side. And then I can either split or use a wire cut and use this curve here. Do the same thing on the other side. And then I can just delete away that piece. And now that isn't an issue anymore. Now I can also run a small fillet on the outside edges of our shank. So probably like a 0.2 or a 0.3. Again, I can't do too much of a fillet because they're going to overlap at the tip here. So we'll see what 0.2 looks like. Select that first edge and the major edge here and our last edge. Right click again. You can see we've just added a nice sort of fillet there to soften the look. If I right click, this time because all of our edges have continuity, instead of selecting those individually, I can double click. It's going to select all of those edges in a chain. Right click again. So that is our completed ring. We've still got a lot of history attached to this. For example, our claws here are still being driven by our center curves. And the center claws also have a parent-child relationship, as do our shared claws for the gems.